Hello, everybody. I'm Craig Budner. I'm with one of my favorite people on the planet, Nichols, who I've had the pleasure of being a partner with. I've had the pleasure of being his lawyer, helping him. So he's been my client. I've had the pleasure of learning from him through the years and how he's dealt with a variety of crises. And I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation for people to learn from. Rich has such a wealth of experience in some areas that most lawyers never get to do. So, Rick, thanks for being willing to do this.
This is kind of a treat. Thanks for having me.
So here you are. You've got degrees from Hastings, Stanford, and Dartmouth, but the beginning of your life wasn't exactly silver spoon-like. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and any memorable experiences that would give people a flavor for kind of where you came from?
I grew up in the no spoon world. I grew up in New Bedford, Massachusetts. Poor, no question about that. My mom worked in a factory for 40 years during the time when we had television tubes, and her job was to put the cardboard cover on the back of the television tube. She did that for 40 years. My dad was he worked in a factory for 18 years and came home one day, he quit. He said he couldn't take it anymore, and he ended up spending the rest of his life as a bartender and a cook. He learned how to cook in the Air Force, and that's where he met my mom. To be sitting here today at age 65, after a 35-year career in the law, if you had told me that when I was 10, I would have laughed at you. I wouldn't have even known what a lawyer was. I'd never met a lawyer. 2, wouldn't have thought I'd be alive past the age of 20 to be even able to take advantage of some of this stuff. Because a lot of the kids I grew up with left this earth at a very young age.
You know, I remember a story that you shared with me about being a little kid in your teenage years, I believe, and kind of peering out the window and seeing a scene that, you know, we may see in movies, but none of us really get to see in live. Can you share that story?
That was back in 1970, at the height of race relations issues here in the United States. And in my neighborhood, it was a poor black neighborhood. And the Black Panther Party had come down from Boston and had kind of taken over our neighborhood. A couple of weeks prior to them coming to town, one of my friends was shot and killed at what was known as the club. It was a hangout for teenage kids. One evening in July, a 57 Ford with 4 white kids in it rolled up very slowly to the club. The driver got out, put a sawed-off shotgun over the top of the roof and fired indiscriminately into the crowd, killing a friend of mine, Lester Lima, and wounding 3 or 4 other people. I was at home at the time, and you could see, it was Kempton Street. You could see Kempton Street from my kitchen window, and I could see and hear the screaming and the yelling, and that was basically the beginning of 2 weeks of riots in my neighborhood. The neighborhood was burned down and burned out. The place where my dad worked, he was a bartender at a tavern. The tavern was burned out. The Black Panther Party came into town and took over the grocery store that was attached to the tavern, and this grocery store actually kept a lot of us in the neighborhood fed. That's where we got our food on credit. I would often walk down to the store. It was owned by two brothers, John and Phil Boncini. I would go down to the store and buy certain items that my mother wanted me to pick up to bring home, and never had any money, and we paid on cash. They kept a little black, I can still see it in my mind, a black leather ledger, and they had your name in it, and they would write down how much you spent that day, and you paid when you could pay. Well, the riots ended up burning out that store, and the Black Panther Party took over that storefront and basically said they were going to take over the neighborhood. And a couple of weeks later, at about 6 in the morning, my mom woke me up before she went to work. We lived across the street in a tenement, across from what was now a burned-out car dealership. And she woke me up and she said, "Richie, the state police are here and come look and come see." And I looked out the window and a phalanx of 40 state police cars with 40 state troopers, 4 in a car, rolled in formation, got out of their cars, had those bandolero bullet things that were across their chest, and basically got into formation and walked around the corner and stormed the Black Panther headquarters. And I can still hear them saying, it was like something you see in a Western. You know, we're going to give you count to 10, come out with your hands up kind of a thing. And they caught the Black Panthers by surprise, took them over, and basically took over our neighborhood. And that was sort of like the essence of what I grew up in. I mean, that day we were kicked out of our homes. It was like a police state. The police searched our houses without any warrants, without anything. We didn't even know if we were going to be able to get back into our apartment. That's the kind of stuff that I grew up in and never thought I'd get out. That was in my beginning of my junior year in high school, and I ran track, and I thought that might be my way out. Ultimately, it kind of was. But it was a tough situation to grow up in. I'll never forget it. And I consider myself lucky to be alive and see if you be able to tell the story.
That's
45,
incredible.
50 years later.
It's an incredible, I've kind of chills hearing that, and during a pandemic, we think we're experiencing pretty unique situations, but wow, that's a whole different world of exposure to the frailties of human relations. Thanks for sharing that. You end up at the greatest college on the planet from there somehow.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. We share an alma mater, Dartmouth College, and talk a little bit about how did you get the opportunity to go to Dartmouth, and a little bit of what you learned while you were there.
In the mind's eye of my track coach in high school, Dick Pont. He's still alive. He's still there. And he saw potential in me. He thought I was a smart kid. Did well in high school. I was top of my class. But I had no idea about the Ivy Leagues. I knew what Harvard was because it was 50 miles up the road in Boston, in Cambridge, but I had no idea about the Ivy League. Had never heard of Dartmouth, anything. In my sophomore year, I started getting handwritten letters from the track coach at Dartmouth. Handwritten, Ken Weinbell, track coach. And I'd get the letters, and I was very fascinated with the fact that this guy took the time to sit down and write me handwritten letters. And I was kind of enamored with that. And because I was getting recruiting letters from all the big schools, University of Tennessee, University of Nebraska, Villanova, Boston College, they all wanted me to come and run track for them. But I was fascinated with these handwritten letters. And I took them to my coach. And he said, well, Dartmouth is a great place. It's in the Ivy League. And I said, well, where is it? So it's up in New Hampshire. New Hampshire. Isn't it cold up there? Yeah, it's cold up there, but it's a great place. I said, well, I guess I'll apply. So I went to my guidance counselor, and I said, I want to apply to Dartmouth. And she looked at me, and she said, you never get in. Forget that. You should go to Teachers College, Bridgewater State College. That's where you need to go. And I'm not even going to help you with your application. And she was serious. So I went back to my coach, and I said, hey, she said she won't help me with the application. He said, I'll find you a guidance counselor that will. So I had Mrs. Mahoney help me with my application. I had no idea what I was doing. And I had to do this personal statement. What's that? So I just wrote about my life and sent the application in, and I got in. And so I got the acceptance letter, and I went to my coach and I said, hey, I got in, but I don't know anything about this place. But I've also gotten scholarship offers from University of Nebraska, Villanova to run track. I'm going to go to one of those places. One day he called me in. It was a Monday afternoon before practice. He called me and he told me to sit down. He was kind of a tough guy. So I sat down. He said, look, he said, you are a good athlete, but you're not great. I thought I was great. You're not great. And if you go to one of these big schools, Tennessee, Nebraska, Villanova, track factories, you're going to get lost in the shuffle because you don't have the kind of talent to be competitive at that level. So now I'm pissed off. What do you mean I have that kind of talent? I know I'm good. I know I'm great. I'll be fine. And he said, no, you won't. He said, you'll be lucky to make the traveling team, period. And I know you want to go to the NCAAs. I know you have visions of being an NCAA champion. You're not even going to make it, period. But if you go to Dartmouth, you'll be a big athlete in a small athletic pond. You will be the best. It's Division I. You'll get to compete against the best, and you will get to the NCAA championships. But more importantly, you're going to get a great education. You won't be on athletic scholarship. So if you decide you don't want to run track anymore, you can quit and pursue your studies. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a degree from an Ivy League institution, and that's going to set you up for life. So I listened to that, and I talked to a few other people, and I decided, okay, I'm going to go. So I went to Dartmouth, sight unseen, had no idea where it was. They had a program called the Bridge Program, which was for kids from the inner city, I was from the inner city, who had no idea where they were going. And you could spend the summer at Dartmouth to get oriented to the classwork and to get oriented into this, pretty staid community in Hanover, New Hampshire. So I went. I graduated on June 13th, and I was at Dartmouth the next day. And my parents drove me up there. They'd never been out of Massachusetts driving. I'll never forget. They dropped me off at the back of Cutter Hall, which was the African American Society dorm, and they just waved goodbye. That was it. I was there, and at Dartmouth, had no idea what I was in for, but I did adapt pretty quickly, and it turned out to be like one of the best experiences of my life. But that's how I ended up at Dartmouth. Yeah.
That's awesome. Tell our listeners, what track events did you excel in?
I was a great indoor runner. Indoor track is not as big now as it was back then, but 40, 50 years ago, indoor track was really exciting. So I was a great indoor runner. I ran the 600-yard run indoors. I was 13th in the country out of high school. I did pretty well, and got to Dartmouth and ran the 600 indoors, indoor track, and ran the 400, 440 in outdoor track. Ultimately, I switched and moved up to the 800 meters, and I did well in the 600. I was Ivy League champion several times, and we had a great 1 mile relay team at Dartmouth, and we were All-Americans twice. And in 1976, beating the likes of UCLA and USC, 4 black guys from an Ivy League college, non-athletic scholarship, running against the scholarship schools and beating them and making the All-American team. That was quite a feat.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. And were there any experiences at Dartmouth that you think back on and they formed who you are today?
Yeah, a couple things. It was clear that if you were black in Hanover, New Hampshire in 1972, you were a rare commodity. I think there were 25 black students in my class. I think there were only 100 total through the 4 classes. So it was different. It was tough to get used to. I was glad that I was actually living in a society dorm. It was called the Afro-Am, because that's where there were all black students there. And after dealing with the challenges of, 1, being at an Ivy League school, 2, being in a totally white environment all day long, every day, 2.5 to 3 hours from home, being able to go to the AM in the evening to let my hair down and relax was probably what saved me. I lived there in the AM for 2 years, and it really helped to ease my mind because I could be amongst people that I could relate to, who were all going through the same experiences, coming from the cities, up here in Hanover, New Hampshire, with all these white folks, like, what's going on? How am I going to survive this? The academics are tough. So I remember that. That was something. The other experience, there's 2 other experiences I'll never forget. I took freshman English, and I had this professor, notorious, John Lincoln. John Lincoln was a tremendous English literature professor and writing. He had the prototypical Ivy League offer, smoked a pipe, and he had the Basset Hound and the cardigan sweaters, and whole 9 yards. And after my first paper, he said, "Hey, look, you're going to write a paper a week, and I stop grading your paper after your 5th error, and you fail." So I wrote my first paper, and he drew a red line after the 2nd sentence, big F at the top. Oh my God! And after the 2nd sentence, I was scared. So I went to his office, and I said, "What is this?" He said, "Well, what it is, Mr. Nichols, is that you can't write. That's what it is." I said, "But I did well in high school." He said, "Yeah, well, this is not good enough for here. And in order for you to make it here at Dartmouth, you have to be able to write. So you have serious problems. Syntax with everything. Syntax. What is that? A syntax? That's something in the Bible? No." Yeah, what is he talking about? I said, "Well, how am I going to make it?" He said, if you're willing to do the work, I'm willing to work with you. He said, it means coming to my office at 4 o'clock every day. Between 4 and 6 every day, I will teach you how to write. And by the time this quarter is up, you'll be a great writer. So I went every day and ended up doing well and never got less than a B+ at Dartmouth in anything I ever wrote. I became a senior fellow in my senior year. And a few years later, 10 years later, when I became a published writer, I sent him my first article and thanked him for teaching me how to write. So I'll never forget that experience. And then the next experience was in my first history class with Professor Danielle, Jerry Danielle.
He was around when I was there.
Yeah, exactly. And after the first class, he said, he picked us all out and said, "Can you guys hang back after class? I want to talk to you." Sure. So he said, "Now, you're all black students, and I know you can't write."
Oh, my goodness.
What kind of crap is that? We're black and you know we can't write? Man, get out of here. I got up and walked out of there. Who's this guy? We're all black students. I know you can't write. Didn't sit well with me at all. Never forgot it. And never forgave him for that either. Never did. So,
yeah,
experience. Yeah.
It's a long way from peering out that window to watch the troopers converge on that grocery store, isn't it? For those who've never been to Hanover, it is not the inner city. It is the anti-inner city. And I know Cutter Hall. I know the spots obviously you're talking about, and those are great stories. So you progressed, you got your master's at Stanford, which I know was a fantastic experience, and we may come back to some of that because you've had some really interesting public policy experiences. And then you had some Olympic aspirations, if I recall correctly, leading up to the 80 Olympics. Talk a little bit about that and the ups and downs. I mean, that was, for those who are young listening to this, 1980 was, of course, the year the United States boycotted the Olympics because they were in Russia or the Soviet Union. Talk a little bit about that.
I made the U.S. team, coincidentally, during my third year of law school. I went to the University of California, Hastings College of Law. I made the indoor team in 1982. And one of the biggest thrills in life is to represent the United States in track and field. I couldn't wait to get my USA uniform and put it on, look in the mirror, and feel pretty good about having satisfied a goal that I set for myself in 1972. And I made a team in 1982. And we got to travel to Milan, Italy, and ran in what is now the Indoor World Championships. I had decided that year that I was not going to concentrate on indoor track. I was going to concentrate on the outdoor season. So I wasn't doing any specific speed work at all in January. And there was a big meet always in San Francisco called the San Francisco Examiner Games. And the meet director, Jim Terrell, called me and said, "Rich, man, I need you to fill out the 600-meter field. I said, "But Jim, I'm really not training for the 600. I haven't done any speed work. No, man, I need you. I said, "Okay, I'll come and run it, but don't expect much." So I went and ran the third fastest time in the country, qualified for the national championships, which were the next week in New York City in Madison Square Garden. So I decided, hell, I qualified, I'm going to go. So I went, came in sixth, disappointed. The race was on a Friday night. I was disappointed. I got up the next morning in New York, took the first flight at 6:30 smoking back to San Francisco. And unbeknownst to me, I had made the team because the first three finishers were foreign nationals. So I was the third American. So the next day on a Sunday, I got a call on a Sunday morning waking me up from USA Track and Field telling me I made the team, that they were traveling the next day to Milan. So I met the team in New York City, got on a charter flight. It was the greatest. I was in heaven. It was the greatest thing ever. And when I got to Milan, I got my uniform, put it on. Fantastic, man. Fantastic feeling. That's my track story. I did make the team finally.
You've got a few track stories, but we'll get into those in a minute. But I hear a policy bent. I hear athletics. What possessed you to go to law school? Why law school?
Yeah, I had kind of decided. I worked in a law firm during the summer up at Dartmouth, and I hated it. I said, who wants to do this? This is boring. It's terrible. So I kind of nixed that as an idea. Never going to do that. Then I went to graduate school, Stanford. I wanted to be a attendant of schools or a president of a university. I wanted to be in education. I wanted to teach. So I got into the graduate school of educational administration and policy analysis at Stanford. I got into Harvard's program, got into Stanford's program. Why did I go to Stanford? Well, because one, it was the best program in the world. And two, their acceptance letter was personalized to me. The acceptance letter from Harvard was on, remember, mimeograph paper? Carbon paper, blueprint. So it was this mimeographed acceptance letter with my name handwritten on a line. What kind of BS is this? This is Harvard? Don't want it. Typical Harvard, right? Yeah. So I went to Stanford instead and got to my first year, qualified for the PhD program after my first year, and took a consulting job in East Palo Alto, which was then the black neighborhood. Palo Alto and East Palo Alto were literally separated by the freeway. Poor neighborhood, that terrible school system. And one of the problems they were having is that the rich areas around Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Atherton, they were part of the property tax base that financed East Palo Alto school systems. And the white folks that lived in those affluent areas were tired of financing the black school system because what are we getting for our dollars? We don't care about those black kids across the freeway. So they were annexing themselves from the property tax rolls. So they hired me as a consultant to come in and try to solve the problem. So I got in there and realized that, you know what, I'm not going to be able to solve this problem because ultimately a judge is going to make a decision about whether or not this school district is annexed from the property tax revenues coming from the affluent neighborhood. I'm not going to solve that problem. So what the hell am I going to get a doctorate in education for if I'm just going to be sitting here applying some policy created by some judge who doesn't know a damn thing about my business, which is education, implement this policy about which that judge knows nothing about. So maybe I need to be a lawyer. That's when I started thinking about being a lawyer. And I decided to take a break. My advisor said, hey, look, man, you're like 21 years old and you're a candidate for the PhD. You need to go and get some real world experience. So I applied to the California State Senate Fellowship Program. So I was interested in politics, policy. And it was a pretty competitive program to get into, and I got in, which meant I got to go to Sacramento for a year. And I worked for a great state senator from California, Nick Petras from Oakland, real good guy. And I got in, and one of the big things we were working on was this thing called Prop 13. We were trying to avoid Prop 13. Prop 13 is a proposition, a referendum that was going to be on the California ballot, which basically cut property taxes down to like nothing and deferred property tax revenues away from school systems and school districts. Mm-hmm. Senator Petras on an alternate piece of legislation that lost by one vote, didn't get passed. So Prop 13 was at the ballot that November, got passed, and California's public education system went down the toilet within 4 years, and it's still one of the worst public school systems in the country because of Prop 13. Prop 13 was what, 43 years ago, 1978. Just terrible. But when I got to Sacramento, I got to see the power of legislation. I got to see the power of the law. I got to see and was involved in writing legislation where one word or two was going to have a definite impact on people. So I thought, I'm going to go to law school, not to practice law, but to be able to be in a position where I can affect policy that's going to affect public and private education. So I applied to two places, Stanford and Hastings, University of California, Hastings. And I wanted to combine my degrees at Stanford, but they wouldn't let me. So I said, screw you, I'll just go to Hastings. So I did, with no intentions of practicing law at all. So that's how I ended up in law school.
That's fantastic. That's great.
But I didn't think it was so fantastic after I got to law school. Law school was a bear. But
yeah, no, law school is a bear. I mean, one of the reasons I want to have this conversation is you've had such an interesting path after becoming a lawyer. You know, you've worked in public policy. You worked with one of the great names in San Francisco, California politics, Willie Brown. Your path was not a, come out, go to Morrison Forster and, stay at a law firm forever. You had a different path. Talk a little bit about what you thought about as you started down your path, and then we'll go from there into some of the more sports law issues.
Well, I realized when I got out of law school that there were three things that I was interested in, probably in this order: sports, politics, and the law. And if I could find a way to combine all three, at some point I'd be in heaven. Senator Petras told me, he said, Rich, the law degree gives you options. It gives you a lot of options that other people are not going to have. So just keep an open mind. He said practicing law might be the least of the things that you want to do, but you've got this great degree that you can do a lot with, but you have to keep an open mind, keep your options open. But sports, politics, and the law, that was my path. And but when I got out of Hastings, during my second year in law school, I was a legal assistant. I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor. Certified student legal assistant in the Alameda County District Attorney's Office in Oakland. And the Alameda County DA's office at the time was the best DA's office in California, probably still is. And so I was picked as one of 8 certified student legal assistants, got to work the summer there. If you got picked, you basically were guaranteed that you'd have a job as a prosecutor when you got out of law school. So I spent the summer there, actually had court trials and did suppression hearings and really loved it. And then graduated the next year, and Prop 13 kicked in, the budget cuts, and my job that I thought I was going to have was eliminated. So here I am, graduated from law school, everybody's got their jobs, I have nothing. So I called Senator Petras and I told him what happened. He said, well, I'm going to send you to a guy, he's got a law firm, his name is Bill Koblenz, Kane, McCabe, and Breyer. And they're a great place. So I go down. I had no idea what Koblenz, Kane, McCabe, and Breyer was. Well, what it was then and still is the preeminent, politically connected, powerful law firm in San Francisco. So I went to see Bill Koblenz. He said, if Nick Petras sent you here, then you got to be good. When do you want to start? Wow. Okay. So I got a job in this firm. So I got to see early on what it would be like to work in a law firm. It was a medium-sized firm, but I knew it wasn't for me. It just wasn't exciting enough. It wasn't fast-paced enough. we were working on some public policy issues that were mostly related to commercial real estate. I had no knowledge about and zero interest in at the time. So I said, this isn't for me really. And an opportunity came up in sports to become the legal editor at Runner's World magazine, which was down in Mountain View, California, which is where everything is now in Silicon Valley. And so I took that as an opportunity and an option. And within 6 months became the assisting, basically managed our coverage of the 1984 Olympic Games from LA. And it was quite an experience. And from that, I decided to start my own sports marketing company and went off and did that starting in 1984. And in the middle of that, I was in San Francisco, loved San Francisco politics, wanted to work in politics, literally went to City Hall one day to inquire about volunteering with the Board of Supervisors, which is the city council. And the clerk of the Board of Supervisors said, go see Supervisor Kennedy, just got elected in her own right. She's looking for somebody just like you, and you might get a job. So I went down, knocked on her door. She was a matronly 56-year-old black woman who went to college late in life at age 51 and was an appointee of Dianne Feinstein's when Dianne was the mayor. Dianne appointed Supervisor Kennedy to the supervisor's seat. Then Kennedy, she ran in her own right. She said, I want somebody who can help me build my own persona. I don't want to be a Dianne Feinstein appointee. I want to be Willie Kennedy. That's who I want to be. Mm-hmm. I said, well, that's me. So she gave me the job on the spot. And that was the beginning of a tremendous experience in real-time San Francisco politics. Supervisor Kennedy gave me the opportunity to develop my own persona in San Francisco. I got to be close to Dianne Feinstein, who all knows now as a U.S. Senator. I still have a relationship with her, and ultimately got to know Willie Brown very well. Willie Brown was the Speaker of the California Assembly for 18 years. He's the smartest person I've ever met in life. He was the king of politics, still was then, still is now. There isn't one president that's been elected in the last 40 or 50 years that hasn't consulted with Willie Brown at some point. I've been in his office when they called. And it was just the beginning of a great experience for me in policy and politics that I'm still kind of involved in.
What makes Willie Brown Willie Brown? What's the thing that you got to observe up close and personal from this great leader that gives you a sense for what was his secret sauce?
Authenticity. He was authentic. He said what he meant. He meant what he said. And he was just super smart. Just a brilliant man. And if he said he was going to do something, he did it, period. And you couldn't BS Willie. Don't ever try to BS Willie Brown because he'll hand you your butt. But he was authentic. He was straight up. You had to be honest with him, and he was just smart. Never saw the guy take a note, ever. Yep.
Take a note.
I still haven't. Never saw him take any notes. Never saw him read a speech, nothing. The guy was just brilliant. He's 85 years old now, still sharp as a tack. I learned a lot from it.
So before we get into some of the sports legal issues that you've worked on, and we've got to save a decent chunk of time for Marion Jones's story, what got you into the world of sports law? Like, what was your first opening? You said you started a marketing company. What was your entree into this world, to use your law degree in a sports way?
Yeah, the entree probably was, back in 1978, the Ted Stevens Act was passed. And the Ted Stevens Act basically broke up the Amateur Athletic Union, the AAU. The AAU was a cartel back before 1978, meaning the AAU was the umbrella organization under which all the national governing bodies of Olympic sport existed. The AAU they were the power. Passed in 1978. Which basically broke up that monopoly. And as a result, every Olympic sport got their own national governing body organization to govern their sport. And for track and field, it became the Athletics Congress. Acronym was the TAC. So the TAC was created in 1978, and I was lucky enough to be around and be a part of it. And one of the outgrowths of the TAC was that we as athletes decided that we wanted a say. We were not going to be dictated to anymore. The AAU was gone. We now have a democratic organization, and we're going to have a part in it. So we as track and field athletes coalesced pretty quickly and demanded that we have an athletes advisory committee with funding. We wanted 20% funding of the TAC, so we could do what we needed to do for athletes. So we got that done. I was a vice president of the AAC, the Athletes Advisory Committee. Ultimately, the whole Athletes Advisory Committee framework was adopted by International Olympic Committee, the U.S. Olympic Committee, and all national governing bodies of Olympic sport. So I was at the forefront of that, groundbreaking stuff. In 1979, a group of us, athletes, four of us, Edwin Moses, me, Harvey Glantz, and Dorian Lamberlet, decided, the Eastern Bloc countries and the Soviet Union, we know they're doping. We know they're taking drugs to enhance their performances, and we got to put a stop to it. Otherwise, we're not going to be competitive on the world stage, period. So we us four athletes put our heads together, went out and got an employment lawyer from Wilmer, Cutler, and Pickering, Jim Coleman, and we created, over the next 2 years, the most stringent in-competition drug testing protocols in Olympic sport. Still exists today. The challenge we had was the challenge we never thought. The challenge was convincing the United States Olympic Committee and the International Olympic Committee, the IAAF, which is the world governing body of track and field, to adopt these drug testing standards and protocols. They didn't want to do it. Why? Politics and money, period.
Yeah.
But we were undeterred, and we pushed it through. And ultimately, in 1984, after 4 or 5 years of fighting, the powers that be, as athletes, smart athletes, lawyers, we got the in-competition drug testing protocols adopted and first implemented at the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Otherwise, we weren't running.
Kind of fantastic irony, because the way we really got to know each other well was working with Marion Jones, who you had been called upon. You were Marion's advisor. Of course, we're talking about the 5 gold medal winning athlete, one of the greatest athletes maybe of our lifetimes. How did you get into a world where, was it through this reform effort that you were working on? How did you get connected with Marion? And tell me a little bit about your first impressions of Marion Jones.
It's interesting how I got involved with Marion. Her agent, I knew Charlie Wells. I knew Charlie from my days in college running track. Charlie went to Arizona State University, and I was at Dartmouth, and we had that mile relay team, which actually beat Arizona State University's mile relay team. And he was enamored with the fact that these 4 brothers from Dartmouth, no athletic scholarship, could get out here and beat our ass in the NCAA championships. Hats off to Nichols and his comrades. So he always called me money. And I lost contact with Charlie, and I didn't see him again from 1976. I didn't see Charlie again until 1997 at the Sports Lawyers Conference. And I was on a panel talking about something. I forget what it was. And he came up to me and he said, hey, Rich, man, it's good to see you. I'm representing Marion Jones. Marion had just graduated from college. I said, yeah, I know who Marion is. He said, I might be needing your services. I said, okay, fine, just call me whenever. So the next year, beginning of 99, actually, he did call me. I had just joined Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich & Rosati, doing high-tech venture capital deals in Silicon Valley. And Charlie called me and said, hey, I need you to help me do Marion's deals, all her endorsement deals going into the 2000 Olympic Games. I said, hey, okay, fine, I can do that stuff in my sleep. So I took her on as a client in 1999, negotiated all of her endorsement deals going into the 2000 Olympics. She made the pronouncement in 1999 that she wanted to win 5 gold medals at the Olympic Games. I had never been done before. And I did all of her deals, and I never met her. Papered the transactions and got them done. She wanted me to go to the Olympic Games in Sydney in 2000, but I couldn't go because I was in the middle of a transaction. In fact, it was a sports transaction. I had a client that was trying to buy the Continental Basketball Association, the CBA, and we were in the middle of due diligence, so I couldn't go to Sydney. And Charlie was disappointed I couldn't go because I think he had the presence of mind to figure out that there was going to be a drug controversy involving Marion's husband at the time at the Sydney Olympic Games, and he wanted me to be there. So right after Marion won the 100 meters in Sydney, our first gold medal, it was announced positive for steroids, and he was a world champion shot putter. And so I ended up advising Charlie and Marion on what to do. It's my first crisis thing. I didn't even know I was doing a crisis management deal then. But I advised them from afar. I was in Palo Alto. They were in Sydney. I advised them on how to deal with the media, on how to deal with Nike, how to deal with all of it, so she could get through the Olympic Games unscathed. This was not her problem. This was her husband's problem. Let the legal system take its course, and she'll support whatever outcome is at the end. So that was my first foray into that drug testing madness. So Marion went forth. She won 5 medals at the Olympic Games, 3 gold, 2 bronze. Came home. She called me in December of 2000, said, Rich, I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. I want to meet you. I'm getting an ESPY award in Las Vegas in February. I'm going to invite you. And we met, hit it off, and began to represent her as a person.
Yeah.
From that point.
And all sorts of highs, all sorts of lows, like for many of us, but hers were very prominent worldwide highs and lows. I'm sure most people watching this know Marion Jones's story, but for those who don't, she wins the medals. She goes through a grand jury investigation. She's associated with Balco, the organization that allegedly peddled the steroids, where Barry Bonds was involved, and a lot of the Major League Baseball athletes, a lot of track athletes, ultimately leading in her being stripped of her medals, going to jail, a real rise and fall, and as we both know, a rise again story. Take us to the grand jury, the story that I've heard you tell before about being in the room with Marion at the grand jury when she's asked a question, thinks about taking a break, doesn't, that whole story. If you'd set that picture in everybody's mind.
Okay, yeah, it wasn't at the grand jury. It was at a meeting that my co-counsel, Joe Burton, was a great white-collar criminal lawyer, a meeting that we were having with the prosecutor and the IRS agent / accountant / drug investigator. So I'll give you the backstory. So in September 5th of 2003, I was in my office, had moved to Texas because Marion wanted us to move to Texas, so we moved to Texas. So I was in my office, and I had CNN alerts on my computer screen, and this alert popped up that said the federal government had raided the Balco labs in Burlingame, California, and uncovered 27 file folders of prominent athletes who looked like they were involved in steroids. And the 3 names that they published in that story were Barry Bonds, Jason Giambi, and Marion Jones. I thought, ooh, that's not good. So I forwarded her the story and told her to call me. She didn't call me. We knew Victor Conti from Balco. Why? Because he stalked us at track meets. He would sit behind us at track meets trying to get our attention, blah, blah, blah. He was kind of a strange kind of a guy. He was the head of Balco Labs. The IRS was investigating Balco and Victor for tax improprieties. Jeff Nowitzki was the IRS investigator who literally did dumpster dives. He dove in a dumpster behind Balco Labs one night and found these file folders with these athletes' names on it, put 2 and 2 together, and kind of figured that Balco was probably creating and distributing steroids to these top athletes. So that's how her name found its way to federal government. So she didn't respond. So I let a few weeks go by. Resent the email, no response. I told her agent, I said, look, it's not a question of if, question of when she's going to get a grand jury subpoena. So when she does, I know she's going to call me. She got the subpoena. How did she get it? She just walked up to her front door on her birthday when she was having a party, handed her the subpoena. She freaked out, called me right away, and the saga began. I went out immediately and hired Joseph Burton, who was a great white-collar criminal lawyer, former chief assistant U.S. attorney in the Northern District of California, where the Balco case was brought. We sat Marion down over 3 8-hour sessions to debrief her and prep her for the grand jury. It was kind of a different kind of a grand jury situation. Now, usually the federal government, they'll give you some idea of what they've got that involves your client. But in this case, they told us 2 things. We're not after the athletes. We're after Victor Conti. So they had really no information that they were going to give us. So we debriefed her over a 24-hour period. And when we got to the point where we thought we had some nucleus of her involvement or lack thereof, it was about a week before her scheduled grand jury appearance, and we weren't comfortable with what we had. We weren't comfortable. that we had prepared her properly for the unknown. So we made a strategic decision. And that decision was to reach out to the U.S. Attorney and to Jeff Nowitzki and say, look, we want to bring our client in for what's called a Queen for a Day pre-grand jury interview. So they said, great. So we negotiated this Queen for a Day agreement. Queen for a Day means it's use immunity. It means that for the time in which you're being interviewed by the government, whatever you tell them, they can't use that against you to prosecute you. But you have to tell the truth. If you lie, they can prosecute you for lying to federal investigators. Did that deal, took Marion down for this interview in the Fairmont Hotel in San Jose. Usually these situations are in small, cramped government rooms with no windows and peeling paint and crummy furniture so you can be uncomfortable. But we were at the Palatial Fairmont in San Jose. We had a window, it was a nice day, and we're at this conference table. It's Marion's in the center. Joe Burton is to her right. I'm to her left. Across the table is Jeff Nedrow, the assistant U.S. attorney, and Jeff Nowitzki, the investigator. And it was slated for a 3-hour interview. So Jeff Nowitzki had a duffel bag on the floor, and he would reach down and he'd pull out a document at a time, drop it across the table, ask Marion to look at it. Do you recognize this? He'd ask her questions, and he'd move on. So 2.5 hours into this, a big, clear sandwich bag. And inside that sandwich bag were 2 smaller sandwich bags. In one of those bags was a vial of some olive oil colored liquid. And the other was a small tube of toothpaste, unlabeled, unused, and he put them on the table. Now, the backdrop to this is, in June of 2003, and this interview is in November of 2003, in June of 2003, Marion's ex-coach, who we fired in November of 2002, sent a syringe full of some liquid anonymously to the United States Anti-Doping Organization, agency. And they sent it to the UCLA lab that decompiled it. And by August of 2003, the lab, Dr. Cantlin, who was the foremost expert in steroids at the time, announced that was in this anonymously sent syringe was an old steroid, acronym is THG. But the present property of that steroid was that it didn't show up in your blood in a blood test, and it didn't show up in your urine in a drug test at a competition. So it was called the clear. Why? Because your urine and your blood, if you took this steroid, would be clear, and you'd pass the drug test and you'd be good to go. We knew that going into this meeting with the feds. But we had never seen the clear or the clear testosterone cream that we had been told was in these tubes. So when he pulled the stuff out, Marion put 2 and 2 together and thought, well, that must be the clear. So the agent stands up. He's 6'6", he's balding, he has a gun on his hip. He reaches across, he pulls out the plastic bag with the liquid in it, and he shakes it in front of her face and says, do you know what this is? And she looked at it and she says, no, I don't. And then he got a little belligerent. You mean to tell me you've never seen or taken this substance before? And she says, I've never seen it, I've never taken it. Then he got a little angry. So I stopped him. I said, hey, look, time out. Let's go in the hallway and talk about this. So Joe Burton, he got up and he walked out the door. I got up and I looked back at Marion and she had this vacant look on her face. It's one of those situations that you've gone through in life where you take note of something, some split-second thing that happened. You just take note of it. You don't know why, but there's something there. She had a vacant look on her face. And I walked down to the hallway and we talked to the U.S. attorney and the agent. And we said, look, if you want to ask her that question, no need to be belligerent. Be polite and respectful. And she'll answer the question. So we went back in the room. He asked her the question again. She says, no, I don't know what that is. Never seen it, never took it. Don't know what it is. And that pretty much ended the interview. She went to the grand jury the next week. She was in and out of there in 40 minutes. So we figured we're good to go. That's 2003, November of 2003. But this investigation really was just starting, and it dogged her. It was everywhere in the media. She's trying to train for the Olympic Games, for the Olympic trials, and this Balco thing was it was a crucible. You know, we were at the front of the news every day, all day for months. She ultimately did make the Olympic team in the long jump, and she was on the 4x100 relay team. But the pressure was so immense that she didn't make the team in the 100 meters. She came in 5th, but had the longest long jump of the year that year. And we hope she go to the Olympic Games and win something. But it was just unbelievable. And by the end of the Olympic Games, she didn't win any medals. She won nothing, and which was devastating to her and to us. And we moved on, hoping that this thing was done. But it wasn't. It wasn't done at all. And fast forward to 2006, 2007, the U.S. Attorney's Office reached out to me and said, hey, look, all bets are off. We've got new information. We think she lied in 2003. And it turned out that she had not told the truth. She did recognize the liquid as the clear, as something that her coach had given her. She didn't ask any questions about it. It was not unusual for coaches of elite athletes like that to give their athletes supplements and substances before and after practice. It wasn't unusual. He gave her the clear as drops under her tongue after workouts. Between the time she made the Olympic team in June of 2000 and the Olympic Games in September of 2000, and she didn't need that stuff. But he gave it to her. She recognized it when she saw it, and instead of saying, take a time out, I want to go into the hallway and talk to my lawyers, which would have been fine. We could have come back in. She could have told the truth, but she was afraid. She said, I said, look, Marianne, if you had just taken a break, and gone into the hallway for 30 seconds, and if you told us that you recognized that, it might have been something that you took. They just wanted your testimony, against other people. They weren't going after you. We could have worked out a deal. She said, and this is years later, of course, when she's telling me, she said, look, my life passed before me. I was sitting there, I saw that, and I recognized it. I thought, God, if I tell the truth and I admit that I know what that stuff is, that I took it, I'll lose everything. And all the people, my family that's depending upon me financially. And she said 30 seconds, it just passed my eyes. And during that time when you guys were in the hallway and came back in, I decided I just wasn't going to tell the truth. And I was going to lie about it.
It's an amazing story. She went to jail for it, obviously. And you were prominent in what I think is, I'm biased, but I think a lot of people would say one of the best 30 for 30s on ESPN that have ever been done, directed by the great, may he rest in peace, John Singleton, and about her life and about her return. But before we get to kind of her return and reflection, are there things that you think about, as a lawyer? We've all been in that position where, you're at a difficult moment with a client. Are there things you think about, and if you could hit the rewind, you would hit the rewind? I know Marianne's felt like she made that second mistake, which we all recognize is the worst mistake. The first mistake is always fixable. That second one's not. Are there things that you wish you had back, or are there lessons that you learned that other people, listening to this, who might be in that difficult situation with a client one day, could benefit from?
Well, no, I can't think of anything that I could have or would have done differently, because I believed her and I trusted her. And I believed it, period. So there was no reason to think otherwise. I do think at times back to that vacant look she had on her face, that split second. When I walked out of the room and she had that vacant look on her face, maybe I should have pursued that. But I had no context within which to pursue that, because I believed her. I believed her, period. And so I don't know, you have to have faith in your client. You have to believe your client. You were involved, and we ultimately, after 2012's report in December of 2004, where Victor Conti basically bold-faced lied about Marianne, that he had given her syringes and had given her human growth hormone, all lies, total lies. And we pursued that. You filed a $25 million defamation action against Victor Conti and Balco Labs, based upon Marianne telling the truth. So you were invested too. We all were. Yeah. And it was a very painful day. It was like October 1 of 2007 when she wrote me a letter to tell me. And the circumstances there were, in March of 2007, I got a call from the U.S. Attorney in New York, and Southern District of New York. Why the Southern District of New York? Tim Montgomery, former boyfriend, had been involved in a check fraud scandal. And he had passed one of the bad checks to Marianne to repay her for, of all things, for Marianne having paid his legal fees in the Balco investigation. So he wrote her a check that was involved in this scandal. When that was made public, I had to take her up to the Southern District of New York, which is no fun. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, you don't want to ever be on their bad side. But I took her up there and to be interviewed, and she was a witness in that case. And ultimately, and that was in August of '06. And ultimately, by March of '07, 1 month before Tim Montgomery's trial in this check fraud case, I get a call from the U.S. Attorney, and she said, "Hey, look, we think Marion lied to us, and we think she lied in San Francisco 4 years ago." So with that, very painful to tell her that, and to tell her that, "Hey, look, I can't represent you. I can't represent you in this. Why? Because they think I'm suborning perjury, because I've been your lawyer through all this. And they're telling me that you lied, not only in this case in the Southern District of New York about these checks, in Balco 4 years ago. So I can't represent you. But I'm going to find you somebody who will." She had no money. "I'll find you somebody that will, and they'll do a good job." It was hard. It was hard, tearful.
It was like a daughter to you. I mean,
yeah, that's right. Telling her I can't help her. Can't help you. Not only can I not help you, Marion, after I turn you over to the next lawyer, who was Hill Allen from Tharrington and Smith in North Carolina, great white-collar criminal lawyer, I can't even talk to you about any of this at all. So that's what I did. I got Hill Allen from Tharrington and Smith in Raleigh, North Carolina, great firm. They had handled Marion's divorce from C.J. back in 2001. They took it on pro bono. Hill took her on pro bono. He took her to the Southern District of New York for the fateful interview, and that was in April of '07. And between April of '07 and September, they worked out whatever deal they were going to work out. I didn't talk to Hill Allen during that time. I didn't talk to Marion during that time. I worried about me during that time. I didn't know what to think. Painful as a lawyer, as a person. It was hard. It was one of the hardest times of my life. Certainly one of the hardest times of my career. And on a Saturday, Hill called me, September 30th, September 29th, somewhere there in '07. He said, "Look, we're done. The government got what they wanted and what they needed, and I'm calling to tell you that Marion's going to plead guilty to 2 counts of lying to federal investigators. She's going to enter that plea next Friday, which is October 5th. And I can tell you, Rich, that the person she's most anxious about telling about all this is you, but she's going to tell you." Okay. So 2 days later, I got this letter. I got a 5-page letter from Marion. Hard to read.
Yeah.
But she basically came clean and apologized to me and hoped that I would forgive her for having jeopardized my career and having invested in her and for risking my reputation for her. And she felt bad that she lied. And it was really a cathartic letter. It was. So I read it. I called her, left her a voicemail message, told her I forgave her. Don't worry about it. Just do what's best for you. And that was that. And then 5 days later is when she, everybody, I think, remembers the courthouse steps speech she gave after she was sentenced to 6 months in prison. She's the only athlete ever in history to have gone to prison for anything related to steroids. She was made an example of, bottom line. Bad, wrong time, wrong place. And she ended up, ironically, going to prison right here at Carswell in Fort Worth, like 20 minutes from my house. I thought, my God, in prison 20 miles from my house. I had a hard time dealing with that.
Yeah, and it wasn't an easy 6 months for her. For those who are interested, you should watch the 30 for 30, but it was a powerful one. I remember when you and I met at Starbucks, and then I watched it on the plane, and I couldn't hold back the tears watching it. But it's a wonderful story because she now realizes, from what I can see, what's important in life. And, I had to ask you the question about would you do anything differently, because this is such a tricky situation. And as you say, I sat in a conference room with her for hours and believed her. She's very articulate. There's physical evidence for why it didn't make sense, certainly as Victor Conti was alleging, as you said. And yet, sometimes we just have to go through that valley to get back out of it. And she certainly has, with a women's professional basketball career. She's doing wonderful things, affecting people's lives in such wonderful ways now. And the story has a happier ending than what we would have thought would have happened. So thank you for sharing that. I know it's a very emotional story.
It's still hard.
Yeah.
It is. She paid the price for everybody and never blamed anybody. To this day,
no.
Never. She said, Rich, I asked you a basketball question. It's on me.
Yeah.
40 days in solitary confinement because her roommate tried to kill her in prison. She had to defend herself. 49 days in solitary confinement. Think about that.
Yeah.
It's terrible. She's not bitter. She's not angry. She's just a gem of a person. Because I know I'd be real pissed off and I'd be angry at somebody if it was me. Go through that, but not at all.
What do you take? We're going to get into women's soccer, which is probably the last big story we have time for, even though there's so many great ones. What sticks with you as a principal? You're one of the top crisis communication lawyers, consultants in the world, because you've dealt with these issues, and we haven't even recounted a lot of the really interesting ones that you've dealt with. But what are some of the things that when you're talking to clients today that you draw upon from your experience with Marion and Balco?
I tell clients, you got to tell the truth, period. The old saying is the truth will set you free. It's true. It will. Now, the truth is not comfortable. The truth is oftentimes very painful, but it ultimately is going to be the key to your freedom and your salvation. It is. And it's real tough to get clients to wrap their heads around the truth. They want to dance. They want to skate. They want to hide things. Ultimately, the truth is going to come out. So it's easier for you to bring the truth out than to have somebody bring it out and force you to face it. I guess the definitive book about crisis communications was written by Lonnie Davis, of all people. And the title of the book is Truth to Tell, Tell It All, Tell It Early, and Tell It Yourself. That is it. That's the watchword of success in crisis management and crisis communications. It's not easy, but that's the deal. I've met with clients for the first time and sit there for 8 hours, talking with them about the truth. I need the truth. What you tell me right now is not the truth. It might be what you want to be the truth, but it is not the truth. And if you don't get in front of it, if you don't face your truth and get control of your truth and be able to tell your truth in the context within which it needs to be told to save your brand and your reputation, I can't help you. In fact, I'm not even going to take you as a client because I'm not going to deal with lies.
Right.
I'm not.
You're basically manufacturing puzzle pieces that don't fit into the big puzzle. So eventually someone's going to find that piece and stick it in there, and it's not going to fit.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And to the extent that a client faces the truth right away, then we can get ahead of it. We can manage it. We can manage your messaging and how we present your truth and when we present your truth. Because if you don't do it that way, someone else is going to present your truth in the context in which they want to tell your truth.
Yeah.
And the way they want to tell your truth is not going to help you at all. I had a case where there was an email, a very high-profile public case where there was an email that the lawyers that I was working with on this case discovered early on. And I saw that email and I said, wow, anybody reading that email out of context, I know the context now within which that email was written, but anybody reading that out of context is going to think that you are guilty. What do you mean? What I just said. I told that to this client's lawyers. I told that to this client's wives. We have to get this email out because it's going to come out because there are 2-3 institutions that have that email. None of those 2 or 3 institutions have your best interest at heart. And you've been indicted.
Mm.
We need to get it out and build and tell the context within which that email was written, sent, received, read, archived.
Yeah.
Nope. Don't want to do it. Okay. Fast forward about 6 months. I get a call from a CNN reporter. They have the email. I said, well, what you going to do with it? Well, we're going to go with it. So give me 24 hours. Okay, we'll give you 24 hours. So I get with the clients and the lawyers to get this email out and tell the context within which it was written and received and archived. The archive file is a problem. Right? They don't want to do it. I said, well, let me give you an example of what happens when you get out in front. You can build the context around something that could bury you. I said, did you all watch the O.J. Simpson trial? Yeah. Do you remember the glove? Do you remember when O.J. put on the glove? Yeah, I remember that. Where did O.J. go after he put on the glove? What do you mean? I said, where did he go after he put on the glove? I said, he went home. That's where he went after he put on the glove. The glove set him free. The glove, which could have convicted him, he got the chance to put that glove on and build his story, his context. It was the demonstrative evidence that told the story, that built the context for the glove that should have, would have convicted him, set him free. He went home. You guys need to do the same thing with this email.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do it. They didn't do it. I mean, I understand it.
Yeah.
But that's the hardest part. The truth.
Yeah, it's looking in the mirror sometimes, whether your truth is an email or something you said. But it's a lesson very few people get to learn the way you've seen it play out. I told you before about walking into the worldwide headquarters of Arthur Andersen, and it was the Monday after after the jury gave him basically the death penalty and killed Arthur Andersen. And I met with Nancy Temple, who sent the email out that said basically, explaining the document retention policy is a nice way to say it. But these are big decisions at big moments. And if you could help a client get there through working with them and getting them a little more comfortable with the truth, boy, and I know there's nobody better to do that. So I don't want to run out of time. I've got basically two things I want to ask you about before we wrap up, and then I'm going to have some wrapping questions. The first is you got an honor that very few people get to meet John Singleton, who passed away not long ago, and we met right after he passed away, not long after.
Died a year ago today.
A year ago today. And, one of the great directors in Hollywood, really, and he did such a great job on 30 for 30 on Marion's story and took that story. What was something you picked up from him? What made him great? What gave him the ability to tell a story that showed that trajectory in such an authentic way that Marion went through? Because I know how much you admire him and you got to spend time with him.
Authenticity. Authenticity it's really the watchword of success. It just is. Because people can feel it when they meet you. If you're authentic, they want to be with you. They trust you immediately. And that's what Marion and I felt with John. So we got a call. The way we got involved with the 30 for 30 was that Mike Tolan was an executive producer for the 30 for 30 series back in 2000. Mike Tolan is the executive producer for the Last Dance, which is the documentary that's airing as we speak about Michael Jordan. Talked to Mike last night.
Yeah.
Exactly. So am I. So Mike reached out to me. I met Mike years ago at Stanford. Good guy. He reached out to me and said, Rich, I know she just got out of prison. Things are kind of sensitive. But we're doing this 30 for 30 film series on 30 athletic icons made by 30 iconic filmmakers. John Singleton really wants to do this film. He loves Marion. Will you guys consider it? So we thought about it, talked about it. We decided, okay, we'll go out to L.A. We went to Mike's house in Beverly Hills to meet with John Singleton and his producer, Paul Hall. And John was authentic, more authentic than you could ever believe. So we get in there, and he's a real soft-spoken guy. And he says, Marion, I've loved you since I watched you run in high school in Thousand Oaks, California. I followed your career. And what they did to you was an abomination. He said, when I heard your speech on the courthouse steps, I was on the 405. I had to pull over in the breakdown lane because I had to cry. And he started to cry as he was telling us his story. He said, there's no way you should have suffered that kind of pain. And I want to know your story. And the world wants to know your story. And I'm going to let you tell your story in your own words. I promise you. He was authentic, crying, grown man, crying tears. So we did the deal with him. And he said, I'm going to take my time doing this film. He took a year and a half to produce this film. And he told us, he said, and I'm going to give Rich the final cut on this film before I send it to ESPN. something in it has to go, it's going to go. Great. Year and a half to do this film. John took his time. He was in it deep. He came to Keller. He spent days here in my house at Keller, just, to get it right. And he did. He really got it right. And when I got the call to go to LA, to go to his studio on a Sunday afternoon, 2 in the afternoon, just sit in there and just watch this thing, the screening of it, I was crying like a baby. It was great. It was done. It was finished. And he said, well, Rich, ESPN, because it's been a year and a half since we started this, things have happened. They're going to want to change some of this stuff. I said, tell them it's not going to change. And he said, well, when I hear from them, I'll just send you the email. Cool. So he did. He sent me the email. 4 or 5 questions they had. They wanted to reshoot some scenes. I just emailed them back. I said, John, we're not answering those questions. We're not reshooting any scenes, period. That was the end of it. And the film aired. Authenticity. The guy was just authentic. And, for John to be gone is unbelievable. Last time I talked to John was in a crisis management kind of a situation. It was August of 2018. I got a call from John because he had been lied about in the black media and was accused of sexual harassment during this Me Too thing. And he was like livid about it. And he couldn't believe that this reporter who he had taken under his wing and was accusing him of this madness. And he didn't know what to do. I said, well, John, I'll help you out. Don't worry about it. We'll be good. So I kind of took care of John. That was the last time I talked with him. We texted back and forth because his great television show Snowfall came out that summer, and we texted back and forth. But when Paul Hall called me and told me that John had died, it was unreal. I couldn't believe it. I went to his memorial service. I still can't believe he's gone. I just can't believe it. Great person, talented filmmaker, to say the least.
Tragically early.
51.
Yeah, 51. So I'm gonna try to quickly go through the U.S. women's soccer a little bit because it's been another interesting journey for you. And I think it tells another story. As I look back at your career, whether it's the ABL, the Women's Basketball League, where you took on David Stern, who recently passed away as well, strong women have found you to be a trusted advisor. How do you think, in reflecting upon your career, and you're going to have to be a little immodest here, but how do you think you have cultivated such a trust of strong women? I know you've got a beautiful and strong and highly intelligent spouse, because I've met her, who had her own career in the public light. But what is that? Is it coming from mother, or does it come? How are you relating to these strong women and representing all these fantastic women athletes?
It came from my mother. My mother was a strong, principled person. She was all about doing the right thing. And my mother was much maligned. She worked in this factory for 40 years, got treated like crap, but she went proudly. She never complained, but she always was strong enough to stand up and do what was right. So I respected her. She was a very strong woman who had nothing but her soul to protect her. So I've just always gravitated toward strong women. And women need to be treated fairly and equally in this society, period, end of story. I just don't understand why not. Why? Really, explain to me why the women's soccer team can't get paid the same as the men. Why? It's a basic question, really. The answer should be they should be paid equally. When I was on 60 Minutes, Nora O'Donnell asked me, well, Rich, what is equal? I said, Nora, equal is equal. Why do people have a difficulty understanding the word equal? Equal is the same. It's not equitable. We want fair, because fair is bullshit. We want equal. Equal is the shit, period. That's what we want. Why is that so hard? With the ABL, American Basketball League, I was one of the founding members, general counsel, vice president, corporate affairs. Our goal was to pay these awesome women who play basketball at the highest levels in college in the United States, then had to go to Europe, Russia, or the Eastern Bloc countries to earn a living playing basketball. We wanted them to be able to be in the United States, making a living wage, $100,000 a year to play their professional sport. Why not? Why not? So that's what we did. We were ultimately taken down by the powers that be, the NBA, David Stern. Why? Not because of the WNBA, but because these women were so strong and so good at their craft that Stern, during those times back in 96, 97, 98, when the NBA did not have a good image, choking coaches, beating up fans and all that stuff, they were concerned that we had a better product under the rim basketball, fundamental basketball, and we had a pretty good cable rating back then. Back then, cable, if you had a 1.2, 1.3, you were doing well, and we did. So he was worried that the women of the ABL were going to be a competitive product to the men when the next television rights deal came up in the year 2000. He was concerned, and he should have been concerned. He should have been. And he pretty much vowed that he was going to make sure that we did not get an over-the-air broadcast television deal before our third year. And we told the public, if we don't get an over-the-air broadcast deal, this is before cable was big, we're going to be dead. And, you know, prophetic. We didn't get the deal, and we ended up going down. But I've always been involved in athletes' rights. I've always been on the side of strong women to get what they deserve, period. Hope Solo, how did I get involved in this? I got a call out of the blue on December 12th, 2012, from Hope Solo's financial advisor, who I knew. He said, hey, Rich, this is what's going on with the team. They're in the middle of negotiating their collective bargaining agreement. They're concerned that their lawyer's not representing their best interests. He refuses to take his salary demands back to U.S. Soccer. Hope said, this is BS. Find me a lawyer who's tough, who can get it done for us. So he called me. So I talked with Hope that day. Talked with the team the next day by phone. And after that, I flew to Boca Raton to meet with the team. And I said, look, it's not complicated. You guys deserve to get paid what the men are being for a lot of reasons. It's not hard. You just have to decide that you want it. You have to decide that you want it. And in this collective bargaining environment, you need unanimity. There's 24 of you. It's got to be 24 to zip that you want it. Can't be 23 and 1. Can't be 22 and 2. It's got to be 24 zip. Because if it's not, they're going to go after that weak link, the weak link. If it's just one of you, they're going after that weak link. You don't have unanimity. You're not going to stay together. You need to be unified. So with that, they took a vote and they decided to keep their then current lawyer. That's fine. I understand that. They got a terrible deal. So about a year and 2 months later, I get another call from Hope. Rich, we got into this terrible deal. We're upset. Can you meet with us again? We're thinking about changing lawyers again. So I met with them here in Frisco. They were here in Frisco playing a game. Met with them, told them the same thing. Look, it's up to you. It really is. If you want to change representation, yes, there are some things we can do, but you are the power, not me. You empower me to help you. That was in January of 2014. In June, I get a call from them. They said, yeah, we're going to sign. I sent them the contract. They don't sign me. Then I get a call in July. They want to talk to me again. Abby Wambach and Christy Rampone. So I talked to both of them. Okay, we're going to sign you. Now it's September of 2014. Oh, Rich, we want to talk to you. The team wants to talk to you again. So I flew to Rochester, New York, and talked to the team before one of their games. Told them the same thing. This time I said, look, what you guys have to realize is that you are professional athletes and you have a finite shelf life. 5, 10 years maybe. After that, it's over. So you need to take advantage economically on your current professional endeavors, your current professional status. Because if you don't leverage it now as your business, you'll never get another opportunity. So that's how you need to think of this. Take control. Hire me. So they did. They did. And I started officially on January 1 of 2015. I was the executive director and general counsel of the Women's National Team Players Association. The goal was equal pay. I began pushing back on U.S. Soccer and a bunch of the BS they were subjecting these women to. And the women realized that they were unified and that they had power. And in January of 2016, we submitted our new collective bargaining proposal, which was equal pay. And the rest, we're still fighting.
Yes, and I know it's in the middle of some pending litigation. It's been much written about, and you're involved in that, so I don't want to get into too much of that. But it's such a powerful fight. I mean, the women have made this country so proud. And you know where my vote stands. Not that I really have one, but it's amazing because you've gotten to do so many things in your career that any one of which would be a fabulous career for many lawyers. What is the thing that has put you in a position, do you think, where you've had so many opportunities to stand for the principles that you've been able to stand for? Is there something that if you were talking to a young lawyer and they were like, I don't want to take those chances or whatever, what would, if they're watching this, what would you tell them as they're plotting their career?
Well, you have to be committed to whatever you want to do. And committed is not only, I'm committed, I'm going to do this. You have to be committed in here.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be committed in here. Because if you're not going to be able to sustain. You're not going to be able to drive through the roadblocks. Sometimes these roadblocks are brick walls. You have to figure out a way to get through it or over it or around it or under it. If your heart is not committed to it, you're not going to make it. You're not going to do it. Yeah. It sounds like a good thing to do, but you're going to fold. So my history has been, I don't fold. I'm committed. If I'm in, I'm in. Ask Edwin. Edwin Moses still calls me the pit bull. You got Rich, you got the pit bull. Rich is not going to let go. He's in. And it's true. I don't let go. I'm in.
I've only had about 20 years knowing you, but it does come together when you hear the story from looking out your window at the age of 15 and seeing principles at play, people willing to lose their lives over principle. And, your mother probably, if I had to guess, knowing you the way I know you, she went to work for 40 years and she did her job, but she always stood for principle. And it gets back to your authenticity, your truth. Your why is once you get a hold of a truth, once you get a hold of a principle that you're willing to fight for, you don't let down. So I think it makes you a powerful, trusted advisor to these wonderful, strong women. I mean, you've represented many men as well, but it is amazing that the thread that carries through this is the way you have cultivated that, harness the power of principle behind these strong women. So it's a fascinating conversation. I hope a lot of people, watch it. We're going to break it up into parts, but we'll also produce it in its long format, because I think the long format story is every bit as important to hear as the sound bites. In fact, they're more important to hear than the sound bites. And we haven't even gotten into some of the other topics. So maybe, we haven't even gotten into the fact that we're sitting through a pandemic and what lessons could be learned from that. So, but I'm not going to take up more of your time today. I'm just going to ask you if you might be willing to come back and tell you how much I appreciate you sharing these moments. I know a lot of them are emotional. I mean, this was your life, your ups and downs, but I asked you that question about, do you regret something? And I knew what you were going to say without you saying it, because you just don't live your life with regrets. You're just not that kind of person. So with that, any last thoughts? Anything I should have asked you?
No, I appreciate it. It's been a career. It's not over. I mean, we still got this equal pay thing. Right now I'm in the middle of trying to initiate a tough negotiation, but you just can't quit. You can't quit. In your life, you have to redefine winning. You have to redefine it as you go along, because winning it's not a binary thing, and you have to be flexible. Keep your eyes on that prize, but realize that the route is going to be circuitous. It's not going to be straight. You just have to keep your eyes on the prize, and you get there and you win. Sometimes you just gotta show up to the track early. Yeah. That was the only time that I didn't get to the track early. I'm still pissed off about it.
Let me ask you one last question. If there was a billboard and it had a saying that could fit on that billboard, and it would be your legacy, that people could learn from and think about as a gemstone, what would be on that billboard? Truth is the coin of the realm. Period. I think that's a perfect way to end this. My friend, we'll have many more conversations. I don't know if they'll all be on video, but you know how much your friendship means to me. You know what I think of you. I look forward to working with you on challenges long into the future. So give that family of yours a hug from me. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Greg.